You're here for season 7 of the Whole Horse Podcast, now at 110 episodes and counting. I'm your host, Alexa Linton, coming to you from Vancouver Island in Canada. I can't wait to continue to share thought-provoking, edge-pushing, geeky, and often challenging conversations with horse professionals from all areas of our industry who are working to make horses' lives better. This season, you can look forward to deep dives into equine bodywork and cranial work with my friend and colleague, Elise Miki, and much more on the specifics of creating enriching, healthy horse spaces, an area I'm particularly passionate about. I'm so excited that you're here listening in, meeting great horsey humans, and hopefully learning a new thing or two about horses and yourself. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. You're here for the Whole Horse Podcast. And once again, I'm here with a guest that I'm excited about. What's new? I always love reaching out to people that have caught my attention. And this is a guest I was just sharing with her that I have literally been watching sort of from a distance for the last 17, 18 years. So I'm really pleased to welcome Karen Rohlf to the podcast today. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. Thanks for letting me talk to your wonderful audience.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, as I was sharing before we got started, I had seen you, I think, as you were beginning to work back in the day of the Pirellis and all of those sorts of things. And I had been involved in that as well. And I remember watching your work and thinking, oh my gosh, she's combining dressage and I remember watching you do the most amazing things, sort of bitless and in halters, and going, wow, this is so interesting. So it's sort of a full circle moment to come here today. And I would love to ask you a little bit about your journey, because I imagine that it's been quite a road, and just sort of, yeah, how you've come to perhaps the awareness that you have now with horses, like what that journey has looked like for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an evolution in process still, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, I was sort of minding my own business doing dressage, perfectly happy dressage trainer with, I thought things were going just fine. But, as it often happens, there was this horse. But I came into natural horsemanship and Pirelli not very typical. Often people come into it because they have a problem horse or an issue that they can't solve, and then some other technique, help solve it. But I came into it with I didn't think I had problems. I just had a horse that was retiring. He was having soundness issues, and the place that I was at didn't have a lot of turnout. And I was just looking for something fun and cute to do with my Grand Prix horse, because he wasn't able to be worked or competed anymore. So that's what I was looking for. And I remember seeing something about, this guy and his horses were running up to him and standing on a pedestal. And I thought, well, that looks fun and cute, So I just by accident saw this flyer for a clinic. It was a Pirelli clinic, but it was taught by someone named David Lichman, which I thought was really confusing. It's like a Pirelli clinic, but taught by another guy. And I just went. And in that first clinic with David Lichman, as like a level 1 Pirelli, I just learned so much stuff that I hadn't ever thought about before. And so I just had so much fun. And this horse, who I didn't think had any problems except the soundness, we were able to find little things that ended up being big things that ended up really transforming him. And I ended up being, I think, able to ride him for longer, in great part because of the increased ease with which I was riding him. So that really got my attention, because I wasn't like looking for anything like that. And it happened anyway. So that just was like, wait a minute, this weird stuff kind of is working, and working in unexpected ways, and in ways that were improving his dressage, even though I wasn't doing anything resembling dressage with the natural horsemanship. So my mind just kind of went, well, wait, this works. How do I learn more? And so I just felt like I had to learn more. And then the next horse was a giveaway horse, problem child horse. And I thought, well, here's a good horse to experiment with this stuff with, because he's already messed up. Like, I can't mess him up more. I didn't think, but so that's the horse Monty, my Lipizzan, that I just was like, let's just try this. Let's just restart this horse according to the instructions in the natural horsemanship. And it worked, and it was amazing. So then I was hooked, and I thought, I need to know more. And just sort of long story short, ended up being in proximity to Pat and Linda, and they were very generous, and they thought it was kind of novel that a dressage trainer was even interested in what they were teaching, back in the day, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I was a bit of a novelty, and I was really eager, and they were very generous, and they I was able to spend a lot of time with them and just keep learning and figuring out how to blend it all together. And the rest is history.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so would you say that your training style, I mean, I know for myself, what's that cartoon, right? Like where the horse is like, oh no, she's gone to another clinic, like, come on, what's she gonna try on us now? Would you say for you that your training style has gone through, that being 16, 17, 18 years ago,
Yeah.
through a shift in, some evolution since then, and as far as, what you focus on, how you train?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the beginning, it was tricky, except that, I had my dressage training horses, and I just kept doing that. And then I had like my one horse, and I fiddled with that. And then I had the Monty, and it was just, I did him differently. And so for a while, it was like, I just do my normal thing over here because people are paying me, and that's what I do. That's my zone of genius. And then there's this other stuff that I experimented with, which is kind of still I'm still putting it a little bit in the cute and fun department. But then, through, again, like all these things aligning, I ended up being in Florida and invited to stay with Pat and Linda. And then I took Monty the Lipizzan and two other client horses who wanted me to they had seen what I was doing, and they're like, yeah, I do it with my horse. And so in that block of time, I actually didn't do any dressage, like, and it was a little bit by design. I think Pat's plan was to keep me on cows all hours of the day, so I had no time to sneak any dressage in. But I just went in and immersed, and I said, a little information is worse than none. And I had a little, so I just went in with 3 horses and spent, a summer, and then most of the year. I actually spent like almost 2 years kind of hanging around and just going, I need to figure out the system of this. And it wasn't until after, at least 6 months of just pure immersion and not really thinking much about dressage that I then was like, okay, now I have to figure out, I have 2 systems. They seem very different. And here I am, a professional, that I'm supposed to teach this. I have to figure out how logically these 2 things fit together. And that's when I sat down to write my book, really for me. I was like, I need to figure out the system. When I go out with a horse, how am I making decisions? Because that's really what it comes down to. What am I going to do now with this horse as they are thinking of the goal that I want to get to? And the stepping away to immerse really, I think, was the big piece, because I wasn't constantly bouncing. I was like, let me figure this out. But I never let go of the goal of what I wanted to be doing with horses, but I allowed myself to step away from it and do some things that I thought honestly were ridiculous, but I stuck with it long enough. I went, oh, that's what happens when you really, really, really do something like that. So that I wrote the book Dressage Naturally to figure it out. And once I kind of had the logic, then it was really fun to come up with the exercises and to, how do I bring in what's happening over here? And it's not as complicated as one would think. It's, for me, I feel like there's mental, emotional, physical. And in dressage world, I had learned a lot about the physical, gymnasticizing, gymnastically developing a horse, and of course, some mental, emotional stuff. And in the other world, I learned a lot about the mental, emotional piece. And then I could observe how that mental, emotional piece affected the posture, right? So when they understand and they're enthusiastic, they hold themselves differently. so I was like, ooh, mental emotional really helps dressage in that way. And I also could see how people who were doing the mental emotional but didn't have the physical piece were also missing something, because sometimes horses were saying that horses were not doing what they were being asked, not because they were impulsive, not because they didn't understand, not because they didn't want to, but they were physically unbalanced or uncoordinated. And I went, wow, they're really, these two systems need to know each other, because we can help each other by having a fuller view of mental, emotional, physical, and how they all interact together. So once I realized that, it was just like, I had to share this. I had to get it out there. I had to get it out there in a way that people could understand and actually put it into practice. So
And have you found that you talked a little bit about your goal with horses, your goal with horsemanship? Has that shifted over the years for you? Like, you probably had one particular goal when you were doing like, high level dressage. And then did that shift as you sort of shifted gears?
Yeah. So I'm always sort of training to feel that, why not have a horse as balanced and engaged and powerful and, all that good. The dressage feels amazing when it works. So that's always kind of, well, not always, but I love doing that. So when I go out and ride my horse, that's often where I'm ultimately seeing if I can I think what's changed is the way I approach it. What's changed a lot is how I solve problems. So if there's a training problem, I'm thinking of it differently. I'm thinking of it from mental, emotional, and physical. I'm thinking of my hierarchy of priorities. So there's times when I will give up my physical goal for the horse if they feel like they really don't like it or if it stresses them out too much. So there's that kind of prioritization. And then I think there's also, or if I feel like it's taking too much away from the relationship. So I think where I live is this messy area of, I want to have a great relationship with my horse, and I want to like challenge them physically and progress. And because I felt how proud and amazing horses can feel, and how it helps them even as they get older to be in balance rather than out of balance. And I think that's a tricky place, because sometimes you're going out of comfort zones. So you really have to actively take care of the relationship as you're going. So a lot of times it feels like a choice of, I'm either going to like progress or I'm going to be my horse's friend. And I want to be my horse's friend and progress. But there's many more decision points that I'm aware of now. It feels like, oh God, life was so easy back then. You just keep pushing and go up the levels until they don't do it anymore. And as long as they still participate and don't try to get you off, then you're doing okay. Now I have more decision points, but I also have more things that I do with the horses. So I have a horse now that came for me as a dressage problem child, going to be put down, and got here, got him happier, was riding him, and then just kept I was like successfully riding him, I'll put that in air quotes, but I just got the feeling, if he's like, I don't want to do that. So now we just play at liberty, even though he's beautiful and really nice to sit on. I just, I can make that decision of, you don't have to, just because you're a beautiful horse and I like doing dressage. You don't like doing dressage, and I don't like doing dressage on a horse that doesn't want to be ridden, even if they're kind. He didn't explode. He just gave me the vibe. And I'm like, why should he? Just because he's with me? No. So we do liberty stuff. So I have more options of what I can do with the horse, because my priority now is the relationship and the happiness and harmony. And I'm not, no gymnastic maneuver is worth killing the relationship. I'd rather. So I'm still working towards everything, but how I make my decisions has changed.
I was going to say, so it sounds like you're really centering the horse more and what they're needing and wanting as well. And sort of, I mean, I think that's the definition of relationship, right? I don't think if we had a friend and we were like, well, we're doing this and I don't care what you think about it, right? It's like they wouldn't be a friend for very long because that's not fun. Yeah.
They have to be allowed to express themselves. And, what is it? Yes doesn't mean anything if no is not an option, right? So my horses are allowed to say no. They're allowed to tell me when they don't like stuff.
Yeah.
So even in, we'll say quote unquote natural horsemanship training, a lot of it is still all training methods at the heart is designed to get the horse to do stuff that you want to do, even if he doesn't want to do it. That's what the techniques are all for. So that's where to be, in the prioritizing the relationship with the horse is across any discipline. And it's not necessarily built into any technique, even if they call themselves natural horsemanship. So it doesn't matter what the discipline is. The person could be doing it for the relationship with the horse or not, because it comes down to these decisions. So my horses they can self-bridle. I can hold the bridle on and they put their heads in, but they are allowed to not, they don't have to. So if my horse turns their head away, the game is not how do I get my horse to want to like put the head in the bridle. It's to me going, I wonder why that happened today. And and sometimes they just need a second and they'll like, I swear they look to the side, think for a little bit, and then they'll be like, okay, now I'm ready. And I'm like, wow, yeah, maybe they needed a second to just like mentally prepare for what's happening. And how beautiful it is if I'm with a friend, like you said, and I went, hang on a second. I want them to go, okay. Right. And if they continue to not want to put the head in the bridle, I go, I'm not going to ride today. Or,
Yep.
So I think we have to, I want my horses to express what they like and don't like. And I think it's my job to work with them. Sometimes I'll adapt and go, okay, I won't use the hose on your face. I'll use a sponge. I don't have to get you to tolerate me spraying you in the face with a hose.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll use a sponge instead. It's fine with me. And then, but again, the tricky part is how do we do that without accidentally training a horse that walks all over you and does whatever he wants and is actually you're training him to ignore stuff. So this is what's super interesting to me is that can you have a relationship, but there is communication that does work. And you are able to control if you need to, because sometimes you do to keep everybody safe, right? Oh, I'm leading my horse along the side of the road and it wants to walk into the road. Like, no, I will control that and get you out of the road. But that doesn't mean I use controlling stuff all the time. So it's this, there's not an easy step-by-step or solid rules, but you have to kind of live in the moment, know your horse, see the patterns, make decisions, so I teach my horses what self-bridling is. And I use positive reinforcement and I tell them, lower your head, put it in your good. I'm teaching it. But once they know it, it's allowed to be a point of conversation. They don't have to, because otherwise they just go into like toleration. And then what have I done? If no is not an option, yes doesn't mean anything. So it's tricky though.
It's so tricky. I mean, because we don't want a horse that goes into learned helplessness and is like, I don't have a choice. We want that expression. We want that. Yeah. We want to be interacting with a individual that sort of, feels like they have some autonomy in their world, right? So there is this fine balance for sure.
Yeah, because it's like there's one horse that gets a little uncomfortable sometimes in the grooming stall. This is the horse that came to me as the dressage problem, and in the beginning he was afraid. So I said, okay, if he's in there and he's afraid, he's allowed to leave. Right, that was our rule. He's allowed to leave, and then we'll reapproach and until he says he's okay to stand there. But then there's times when he's not afraid. So if he's not afraid, then if he goes to leave, I'm allowed to go, please go back there. And if the please go back there doesn't work, I'm allowed to clarify that. Now, hang on a second. If I do touch you on the chest and move that direction, I'd like you to follow me. So it's this, again, what's the rule? The rule is you got to decide in the moment and have some guiding principles. If my horse is afraid, I don't want him to feel trapped. by me. So that's like sort of, okay, that's a little guiding principle. But if they're not afraid, and you got to figure out, is he afraid or is he not afraid? Or am I teaching him he can just leave anytime he wants, which is to me not okay. I want my horses to hold and be okay. So again, I think it's really, really tricky to teach, but I think it's good to talk about there is this decision point and know you have decisions. It's not your horse should always stand in the grooming stall perfectly at liberty. Well, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think if I'm going to communicate with my horse, I'd like that communication to work. And if it doesn't work, it's up to me to figure out why it's not working and do something differently. Then it's also a choice whether or not to use a particular communication in a given moment.
Yeah,
I'm probably making everybody go, oh God, I thought I could learn this stuff. And now it seems really hard. But I like to be real. I could just say, hey, I have these magic 3 steps. And if you always do them, it'll work. Nah.
But every horse is so different, right? There's just like, that's what that for me too, when people ask me as, a body worker or an animal communicator, even like, what should I do for this? And I'm like, well, every horse, it's totally different. It depends. And so there's this sense of, okay, yeah, like, being with, and it depends on the day and the moment and how they woke up that day and how you woke up that day. There's a lot of factors in there. Yeah. So yeah. I would love to circle back around to dressage specifically, because I know that this is a sport that I would say there's some controversy happening in this particular sport, at this moment, and has been happening for some time. These pieces around how horses are being trained and what is even being sort of looked for, by judges or by trainers or people, working with dressage horses. And this is not my field of expertise, but I am very interested to hear sort of, your opinion, any guidance you might have around, this place that dressage is in right now, and how we maybe come back to a spot where, like you say, horses are actually enjoying themselves or actually benefiting from the training, the work, the competition, right? Because a lot of the examples I've seen, the horses are sort of being progressively broken down by the way they're being ridden.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, one thing is this problem of how horses are being ridden is happening in many disciplines. And fundamentally a lot of the same problems, like roll cur and hyperflexion and tying horses down and, restricting tie downs, martingales, nose bands, things that you tighten to restrict a horse, is happening lots and lots of places. The trouble is, I think the difference with the dressage is that dressage actually says it's about not that, right? So nobody said that, reining was about, collection and whatever, or maybe that's a bad example, but like jumping. I mean, they just got to jump over the jump. But dressage says that it's about harmony and lightness and all these things. So I think dressage stands out because it seems very hypocritical. It seems to not be doing the exact thing it claims to be doing. But I have to, I think it's not just a problem in dressage, and that would be a mistake to only look there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then so the other thing I think of is there's dressage, which again people form different pictures when they hear the word dressage, and modern competitive dressage is only one small sliver of what dressage means. So there's the way that is trained, and then there's what happens in competition. That's another sliver of a sliver. Unfortunately, that's the sliver that we all see the most, because that's the Olympics and that's what's on the magazines and stuff like that. So I think, first of all, like when I picture dressage, I am not picturing that sliver. I'm picturing my picture of dressage. So with that said, it's the prioritization. It's horses who cost a lot of money, need to perform. And so it ends up being very controlling and very getting things done in ways that will still get a good score. And, there's anything with a lot of money is going to be unfortunately contorted when it gets into human hands because bad decisions are made, I think. So yeah, and one problem I think it's getting amplified because the definition of the object of dressage used to be in the rule book, and it's in the FEI rule book, and it said this, that the object of dressage is the development of the horse into a happy athlete through harmonious education, resulting in a horse that's calm, loose, supple, and flexible, but also confident, attentive, and keen, thus achieving perfect understanding with his rider. Now, I like that definition.
Me
and
too.
Yeah, that's that's dressage to me. That is dressage. And that was in the rule book, Article 401. And then you could argue whether anybody was actually doing that. But at least I knew that was what dressage, that was what competition dressage said that dressage is supposed to be about. But recently, they actually took that out of the rule book and they put it in a different section called, I think, useful documents.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm a little peeved because it's almost like they're like, well, no one's really doing that, so let's not make it a rule. Let's just make it a, an interesting guideline over here. And I think sometimes even if the judges are still using that, appearances matter. I mean, I used to proudly state that Article 401, as you can tell, because I have it memorized. Now I'm like, well, it's not really in the rule book anymore. What does that say? Who made that decision? And why? So yes, I think riding, and other things that it says in the rule book with the qualitative part is, as a rule, the pole, the highest point, and the nose in front of the vertical. That will happen inside the competition arena, but often not in schooling. It is much more the norm to be behind the vertical, even if it's not roll cur. It's just, so yeah, I mean, judging, judges can only judge what happens in the arena. So that's a weak link. I think dressage needs to be better about policing dressage. And I'm not sure, I think the shift of where that object of dressage is stated in the rule book is not a good development. It just weakens it, and it's kind of going, it feels like, I give up. We're going to do what we're going to do. And, there are, lovely dressage riders, but I think the normal, there's a lot of not. I mean, there's a lot of lovely ones and there's a lot of not, but my view of dressage is it's for the horse. I think of that object of dressage and I think that's what I want with a horse. That's where it starts, and that should be there at the end. And you shouldn't give that up in order to get other movements done. I mean, they're going to go through temporary moments of like, oh, this training isn't going so well. And then they figure it out and then it's good again. So it's not like it's always, daisies and butterflies, but you can go through it. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm sort of rambling at this point, but I think the dressage competition world needs help for sure, as do many disciplines. I wish dressage stuck up for itself a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree, because when I ride, which is not super often anymore, my main riding horse is turning 25, but I love, the concept of dressage. I love working within that framework, and I find it so beautiful when it's like, that feeling. I call it like the divine ride, where you just that you're in that sweet spot and you're floating and your horse is open and there's this connection, and it's like nothing else. It's just so incredible, right? And I think my heart yearns for a place where the riding that we do contains within it the belief that riding should be beneficial for our horses and should actually help them to be healthier, happier, right? All of those things. And so for you, with the work that you do and the dressage that you hope to bring forward, I love watching you as you shared that statement. Like, literally, you have it memorized. This is obviously an area that is close to your heart. What things do you do to make sure that the riding that you do, the work that you do, benefits horses or benefits your clients' horses or the horses that you're sort of interacting with probably out there around the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, I try to walk the talk and live it every day with my horses, and I'm trying to be aware of all the little decisions I make, and just trying to get the word out there as much as possible just by doing podcasts and having my own podcast.
Totally.
And I think I'm not a fighter, so I'm not as activist, but what I try to do is just get the message out there, get the picture out there, and show people an actual other way, and not just talk about it, but do it, show it, and then help guide people through it by having blueprints and decision-making processes, and giving so that they can go out there and make those different decisions. And I think one of the ways things can really change is by showing people that there's another way. Because I think so many of the dressage students that are like dressage gone wrong, or it's like maybe they're successful, but they try me, and then they often it's usually like there'll be this exhale, and they'll say something like, oh, I knew it didn't have to be that way. Right. So they're knowing that, like, it doesn't feel right to crank the noseband tighter. It doesn't feel right to push, but they didn't know another way. So the more I can let people know that there is another way, and you can get results, but also have a relationship with your horse, and here's how, then my goal is to put the trainers who are just talking badly about horses, oh, get that lazy bastard just to do it, that kind of stuff, that students will see that and go, oh, well, I'm not going to take lessons with that person. Like, I have this quiet underground, maybe I'm an activist, just the underground kind.
Yeah, you're underground activist.
So educate people and empower students to feel confident enough to ask questions and challenge things that don't sound right, so that those trainers who are just like militaristic and just pushing horses and insulting students, that they won't have, people will be like, oh, like, I don't want to do that. Like, there's different ways, so yeah, I think just letting people know that there is a different way. So many people just comment when they get a little taste of what I teach, and they just go, oh, and they know that they don't have to stop, because people think, oh, I have to stop doing dressage. Like, no, we have to do it differently, and here's how. And then they immediately start to feel the difference, because it's a different attitude. The horse feels the difference. Now they're getting along, and it sort of can really quickly, they just go, oh, that's different. That's the way I want to do things.
To get a little more specific, is there any sort of foundational aspects that you see, like threads of when someone comes out of that world and goes, okay, I need something different, and then they enter your world, or they start to do, make a change? What are some of the sort of first things that tend to need to shift for that horse and rider?
Yeah, I think it's a little different for everybody, but it's taking a holistic view, right? Perfect for this podcast, the whole horse podcast. Like, to just for a second, like, I have a problem with this thing, and I'll step back, and I like, how much turnout does the horse get? What does he eat? Your friends, so just the like, oh, why is she asking me those questions? And then I'd say trust, a different level of trust, because what happens when you stop doing purely controlling system, and you can be in a controlling system and do it very well and very refined and very light, but it's still controlling. So when you let go of things, if I say, okay, like, ride without reins, I'll immediately see like where the problem is. And if someone's worried, I go, well, exactly what are you worried about? And so then we can go, oh, the horse is running off, or the horse is whatever. And then we're like, okay, now we can play with that. So I think that different ways that trust and having people not feel like they are controlling things, but to actually educate the horse to mentally learn it. Like, I'm just started helping someone who's a higher level rider with her horse that's having trouble figuring out pee off. Like, it can do everything else, it just can't pee off. And so it's like this little mechanism, and the way I'm approaching it, I can see her going, wait, you're going to loosen things, but then the horse is going to rush forward. I'm like, yeah, well, we have to teach them not to do that and teach them to listen to your seat instead. And because if you're holding, then the head's curled up and then they can't engage behind. And so I'm trying to meet them where they are and then go through the logic of like, I'll ask, what does the horse need to know? And that's a question that they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What does the horse need to know? They just need to do the thing when I put my aids on. I'm like, no, but what does he need to know? And then, okay, well, how can we teach him that? And then have strategies for mental education that's very different than muscle memory. So I think just stepping back and then seeing that there is mental, emotional, physical, and there's teaching versus controlling are the main, everybody's going to fit somewhere into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, just this view. And I imagine I've seen this with my horses as well, where it's like when you do take that step back, you're like, oh, there's a really big gap over there. And I seem to have missed a massive piece, around potentially just the building blocks of training, right? Because I'm sure with a lot of dressage horses, if they're maybe started fairly young and they're trying to ratchet up the levels, you come to see some fairly substantial places that are not well filled in, that horse needs more foundation in. Is that what you notice?
Yeah, and I have this what I call the happy athlete training scale. And this is, I think, which can really help in this moment. So the base of the training scale is happiness. And that means I'm a happy person when I arrive to my horse, right? Horses make us happy, but they shouldn't have to, right? I'm going to do the work. So I'm my best self coming to my horse. And when my horse is not with me, he needs to be happy, like has a happy life before I get there. And, like you said, a lot of horses are put into training young. Shoes go on, and now they can't be turned out with anybody else because they're wearing shoes. It's like that little decision of when to put shoes on can change so much. They don't learn social skills from other horses. They don't. Anyway, so how is my horse's life when I'm not there? Does he have forage, freedom, friends? What's going on? So that's the step back and go, what's his life like?
Yeah.
Or
the other 23 hours.
Weaving. Like, how happy is he going to be? Maybe he's happy to see us because he's like happy to get out of the stall, but that's not the, that's not. So the base is happiness. That means I do the work to be my best self, and I manage my horse's life because the horse's whole life is in my hands. I'm making all the decisions. So what decisions am I making for him? So if I look out the window, I'm like, oh, look, he's happy. We'll put it in that quotes too, because we don't really know how they feel, but like signs that he's not miserable. Then if we've handled that, then the next priority is harmony. So what happens when I go out in the space with my horse? Does he look at me and just keep grazing? Does he move away? Does he come towards? Like, how much do I trust him? How much does he trust me? Like, what's the dynamic when we're together? And that can be just in the same space together, or as we start to interact or be near each other. And so already you can see it's a decision making, because if we're not in harmony, I'm not going to start going, oh, we need to get along better. I'm going to back up and go, well, how's the happiness? Did I arrive? Maybe my horse isn't harmonious with me because I'm still, ruminating over something in my head of an argument I just had, right? Or maybe he's been locked in a stall or whatever. So, you always start at the base and then work up. So if we're kind of okay together, tends to come to me rather than away from me, and, we're getting along basically, then we can start thinking about communication. And it's definitely easier to communicate with someone that you're in harmony with, who's happy, right? So if there's happiness and harmony, then we go, okay, how's the communication? Now that we're okay with each other, we're okay ourselves with each other. What if I ask you something? How does that communication work? And what if my horse tells me something? Am I listening? Am I being a friend? Or am I going, shut up? You're supposed to do what you're told, right? So what's the dynamic of communication? And for me, so many problems come down to basic communication miscommunications. The horse isn't really sure if they're supposed to do something or not, or exactly what that thing is. They don't know if they did it right or not. So many even qualitative. The problem in your half pass is not the positioning of the half pass. It's that your leg is on, but they're not really responding to it. So now you're having to hold something else and hold something else and hold something else. And you've got a paragraph of aids on, and you're getting something resembling a half pass done. But instead of me going, you need more bend, you need more this, you need more that, I go, let's make sure what you have is in lightness and in clarity. And, so horse is like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do. And they're doing it. That's when the qualitative stuff happens. And if it still needs more quality, now you just tell them what you want more of. I mean, I'm oversimplifying that, but most of my work when I meet students is figuring out where's the disharmony and where's the miscommunication. And if I can pluck those out, you can do anything if you have harmony and communication. And then how much bend or how much angle, like that's easy peasy. That's simple. But the main problems are mistrust or miscommunication. So now if you're happy and harmonized and you're communicating with each other, then you can start to think about biomechanics, right? I don't care how much bend you have if you're fighting with each other. I don't care if you did a clean flying change while you're being run out of the arena, right? So, once we're happy and harmonized and communicating, now it's like, okay, let's talk to them about ways to move their body so it's healthy and it's aligned and it's over the back and it's, all of these yummy things that are keep the horses healthy and calm, loose, supple, and flexible, like it said in the object of dressage. And then you really can do anything because you got a balanced, free, loose, supple, flexible horse that you're happy and harmonious and can talk to. You can do better reining that way. You can do better jumping that way. You can do better driving that way. Everything gets better. And then the pinnacle, the little triangle at the top of the scale, is for me dressage. It could be whatever sport specific training you're doing. For me, it's dressage. And I love this idea of this pyramid, because if you think about the little pinnacle at the top compared to the big base of happiness, that shows you how much focus and time is being, it's the priority, but it's like my horses spend a little bit of time doing dressage and a lot of time being happy.
Yeah.
And that is very different than a lot of barns where there's a lot of dressage being done and very little amount of happiness being experienced. So in that gives you the structure, but also it helps you make training decisions. So if you're having trouble with your half pass, I'm gonna right away scan all the way down and go, well, what's the basic balance of the horse? How are they moving in general? And then if there's an issue there, then I'm like, well, how's the communication for that? Well, do you even trust your horse to begin with? And then how's that happening? So I go all the way down. And if you can find, there's always going to be things to improve, but if you see red flags, you have to go to the bottom red flag. I mean, you can start tweaking anywhere along the line, but the quickest way to improve is to go to the base, arrive a happier person, and make sure you have a happier horse. Just go all the way there. That's the fastest way. So for me, it's not going back. It's just going to the base and building back up again.
I love that so much. I'm a big proponent of environment, the 3 Fs. And because of this, it's like, and I love this imagery because I'm sure I've thought of it kind of this way before, but this is like just such a strong image of is that foundation there? And if it's not, it's going to be affecting. And this is one of our greatest frustrations as body workers, of course, because, say I'll go out to a barn where a horse is living without friends, with not enough forage and in a small space. And I'll do a body work session and it might be somewhat supportive. But at the end of the day, I come back and I'm probably working on the exact same thing even a week later. Right. Yeah. And there's this intense frustration of, okay, I definitely feel like I'm putting like a little tiny Band-Aid on like a dam, you know?
And that's the other piece of, I think, that's cool about, I'll say what I do, but because that biomechanical piece, it's sort of in the middle, bridging happiness, harmony, communication with the sport specific training, And I realized that I couldn't just do, okay, we're happy, now I'm going to go do dressage the way I used to, because I'm affecting their biomechanics with the idea of it's really about posture, right? It's the horse's posture, and everything affects posture. So it's not just body. So when I start thinking biomechanics, I don't switch to just body. All the things, are there. And I have this crazy hypothesis that moving in balance and freedom is going to feel better to the horse, right? So in balance and freedom and alignment should feel better to the horse, that rather than being choppy and crooked and braced. So the whole protocol for what I call finding the sweet spot of healthy biomechanics is that we play with the horse and we use our excellent communication to ask the horse to try some different things while they're moving. And as we try these different things, they actually pass through moments of alignment and moments of balance and different combinations of relaxation, energy, and balance. But we don't make it happen. We do an experiment and go, I wonder what would happen if we had higher energy or lower. I wonder what would happen if we just, I see the haunches to the left. I wonder if they could go to the right. Okay, thank you. And we leave them alone. And as we play, this really cool thing happens. So the horse goes, can I just stay here? And where they choose to stay will end up being as aligned and free and stretchy and powerful as they can be at that moment. And in the moment we achieve all this, the loose, supple, and flexible is a moment where we're doing nothing, because I'll ask for something and then I say, now what do you want to do? Oh, can you try this? Now what do you want to do? So when I'm in neutral, the horse is achieving everything I want to achieve, and there's no aids for it because of the idea that it should feel good to the horse. So we have to sometimes, challenge the horse, go, I know this feels weird and I know you don't like to be this way, but can you just try it for a second? Because of our relationship and because of our excellent communication, could you give it a try? And they'll be like, okay, I'll give it a try. I promise I'm not going to hold you there. I promise I'm not going to control you there. I just would want to know, could you give that a try? And we work really hard to get the communication super clear. And the horse trusts us that we're not going to hold them in that awkward position that they're trying to avoid. But we kind of go to yoga class and go, can you stretch over there for a second, and then leave it alone? So it's once the horse starts to get this idea of like, oh my gosh, I know you asked me to do those weird things, but now I feel better. It completely changes the horse's attitude towards your aids, because aids are called aids because they're supposed to help. They're not supposed to make horses do things that they're trying to not do. That's never going to feel good. So the way I play with the basics of biomechanics is in this way where we're using communication and partnership, and we're listening to the horse. So if the horse's head wants to be all inside out, that's great information. I'm not going to control that or try to put it somewhere that looks good. I'm going to play with their body and their mind until their posture starts to change. And then they tell me what they needed. Oh, that was interesting. That horse, when they lowered their energy there, got better. That's interesting. That other horse got actually better when they got really high energy. Or that's funny. It looked like they're falling on the left shoulder, but when I moved the shoulder more to the left, they actually started moving better. So I approach it with the idea that I probably don't know. And I'm really curious to see what that horse tells me that they need in their body. And that's where I start. And we'll get 80% there. And then I might make some educated, hey, I think that horse needs to do some shoulder and left medicine or something like that. But I just know it's something about energy levels, something about relaxation, and something about different balances. And if I can muck around with the cooperation of the horse, we will find a spot that is better than it was before. And then we can repeat that. And then the thing is that the horse finds it themselves. Like I can turn my horses loose in the round pen and just wait. And a couple laps, they're going to be like, oh, let me change some things and get where I need to be. Which is really, to get that stretch, that loose, supple, and flexible part. And then gymnastic development is, that's an ask. That's us saying, hey, let's go to the gym, horse, please. And, motivating and all that stuff. But the basics of healthy biomechanics, the idea is it's good for the horse. So it should feel good to the horse. And if it feels good, wouldn't they want to help get there? But I have to show them some options, because otherwise Like picture a horse that's really crooked in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably know this as a body worker with people, like sometimes I'll lay on a table and then the massage therapist will straighten me out and then I feel really crooked. And
Yeah.
I really want to go back to my old crookedness. So if we have a horse that's crooked in one direction and then we, with our aids, put them straight will always feel weird compared to where they're used to being. But if they're crooked to the left, and for a moment or two, with great compassion, I tempt them to move the opposite place for just a moment. And as soon as they're there, I leave them alone. They'll go back to their other crookedness, but they'll be, and I'll repeat it, and they'll pass through. So I'm saying, here's where you're comfortable. Please give this a try. I know it's weird. Thank you. Now, what do you want to do? And if you do that with great focus, they'll start finding the middle and they're going, can I just stay here? And I go, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Awesome.
that's the kind of cool piece where we're not putting them in a shape of a horse that looks like they have the right posture. We're literally playing around and letting them tell me where they feel better. And that's where I think it really is healthy. And that's where a lot of students report that, the chiropractor will suddenly be like, oh, there's nothing to adjust, like that. They're not out anymore because the horses are helping themselves get there. Or when the body worker comes, it makes a bigger effect because the horse is already trying to be there. And now the body worker just makes it even easier for the horse. But it's like a unwinding together.
Yeah, I love that. I find that sometimes with Diva where it's like, oh, she's having, her right bend is just, feeling a little more sticky. Okay, what does that, maybe if we ask for a little haunches in or just a little bit, just ask for like a little moment of something. And then I can see in her of like, oh, okay. And it starts to, I can just feel those pieces start to free up. And it's that interesting thing. And sometimes I'll come and I'm curious about this. I think this is sort of the last, we're starting to come to our end, but this last piece that I'm curious about is where groundwork comes into your training and your work, because I know for myself sometimes I will definitely end up getting off. My one mare I don't ride because of some of her health stuff, but we do a lot of fun groundwork with classical dressage kind of undertones to it, and I find I do the same thing for her. I'll ask for a little bit of something and then just wait and see how it feels, see how it lands, right? Or use even my hands sometimes to suggest some openness in her body. So just wondering how that might come in for you with yourself, your clients.
Yeah, I love groundwork. I mean, it's so invaluable. I mean, all my horses learn, through just playing with how I described, like they all can like stretch and find a let loose posture, walk, trot, and canter online or Liberty if we don't need a line. So they all have that as a basics. And then also, for dressage related, then there's some in hand, like they can long line. I love long lining because you can really
totally
your horse, and especially for lateral work and stuff. So, and it gives you a chance to be on the ground, but going straight.
Yeah.
So much groundwork ends up being circles, but I love the little, just walking lateral work and halts, and really, that you can do some very precise stuff that can be hugely impactful on the ground. Yeah. And even in a stall, I had a horse that had laminitis. And so she was recovering from that. So she had to stay in the stall, but I go in there and just do posture work. And we did like walk, halt, walk, halt, walk, halt around the stall on getting her weight on the hind end, which was good for her front feet. And she came back from that bout of laminitis better balanced than before. And I went, oh, I'm going to pay attention to that, because that's all I did. But it was small and precise and based in good communication and just looking at these little nuanced things. And I couldn't push. So I had to be clever. So I think groundwork is extremely helpful. Of course, depends on what kind of groundwork you do. And then I do all of that with all my horses, but then it changes on horse to horse of what they enjoy or what feels beneficial, or like, oh, that one can stretch all day. It doesn't need to practice that. So I do other things. So I really mix and match with my horses to see what they need. But yeah, I love good in-hand work can be hugely valuable. And it's very humbling to like see how nicely your horse does a, like canter, pirouette, canter, circle around you, and you're not touching them. And then I'm like, oh wait, why am I using so many aids when I'm riding them? Do it right here. So it gives you a lot of good information, and you can see your horse. So yeah, there's lots and lots of good reasons for groundwork.
I love that. I think that a lot of I guess this is probably super generalized and stereotypical, but a lot of the, I guess, dressage or competitive horses that I've been in interaction with, and have been, their groundwork has not been the biggest focus for them, I would say. Oftentimes that
lunging
becomes
in side
something,
reins, doesn't
right?
that count? Just lunge them in side reins, or if you want to be really fancy, a passeau, just like put their body somewhere and twirl them around.
Yeah, just a sense of like when we talked about the gaps, it's like I see this and I go, okay, like there is this like really significant gap in the connection, in the communication, right? In the possibility of this relationship when that ground, we just jump into the saddle and off we go. We miss this real, juicy area for all sorts of learning together, right?
Yeah, and there's some people that they're local here in Ocala, and they've created the Baroque equestrian games and and they have all these patterns, and they're really cool because they're really training patterns. I mean, they have their competitions and stuff like that, but it's their training patterns, and they have a whole section on groundwork, and some of it is very simple but not so easy, like to lead horse and then halt, just the walk halts, but where they're up, and then being able to halt and move away, and then have yours go in a circle and then come through the middle, halt, very simple handling things that aren't, going all the way back to like natural horsemanshipy stuff. It's very dressage focused, but they start where, I mean, I was doing it with my filly, a 1-year-old, like you can start practicing this. So the Baroque equestrian games is just a great resource for kind of dressage patterns you can challenge yourself with. They're basic, but again, they do something, and there's lots of other resources with in-hand work, and yeah, it all can be good if you find the right teacher who's not going to have the attitude of like how to make your horse do it, even if he doesn't want to. Always look for the compassionate regard for the horse, and that can show up in many different disciplines, but you just want to select the right person to be guiding you.
Oh, that is such a beautiful place to finish today, and to also ask for you to share how people can get in touch with you and find your work.
Yeah, I'd love to. So dressagenaturally.net. You can find, it's very Googleable. If you put my name in or dressagenaturally.net, you'll find it. On dressagenaturally.net, there's a place you can get 3 free videos. That's like 3 examples of some of the more common training problems, and maybe a little bit unique way of thinking about them. So you can do that. But because we talked about the Happy Athlete Training Scale, you can also go to dressagenaturally.net/quiz, and you'll just have to write that down, remember, because I don't think it's on my website right now, but it'll actually walk you through some questions, just 3 questions based on the Happy Athlete Training Scale. And then based on how you answered, it'll give you some like suggestions and thoughts and things to do. And you don't have to opt in for that. But if you like what that showed you and you want even more specific training videos to be sent to, then you can opt in for even more. So that's dressagenaturally.net/quiz. So those are 2 things that right away are easy to. And, if anybody needs any help finding anything, just email me. We're really happy. We actually do private consults to help people talk about their horse, and then we can point them to what resources are best for them.
Amazing. Yeah. Aw, thank you.
Nice to talk to people.
Yeah, so nice. I really appreciate, on that topic, talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time today, Karen, and all your wisdom.
Well, I really appreciate you asking me on and thinking of me. And I just, it's a topic I love talking about. And I'm so happy to meet like-minded people who are trying to get this kind of message available to people, so people know that there are kinder ways of doing things.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody listening does as well. I just want to thank you all for listening in today. Hope you learned a thing or two, and we'll see you next time for our next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks so much for listening in today. As I shared a little bit in our last podcast, I'm offering my kinetic communication online course in a self-study format starting on December 15th. And that includes extra support from me with 2 live webinars to join and ask questions. So if you've been wanting to add applied kinesiology to your wellness toolkit, and especially if you're interested in learning how to use this simple and powerful tool to connect with your own animals, this is a really great opportunity. I've taught this skill, which I also use daily in my practice with humans and animals, to hundreds of people over the last 17 years, and I'm hopeful that I get to share it with you. For more details, you can head to alexalinton.ca/kinetic-communication. And also for all the equine body workers out there, as well as human body workers, the level 1 of our equine cranial therapy certification, this is with myself and Elise Miki, is now open for applications for our January 2024 intake. So if you've been looking for a comprehensive osteopathically informed program that's also improved by the NambiCam, you can look no further. More details on this program are at equilibriatherapeutics.com/equine-craniosacral. Look forward to seeing you there.